Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello and welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. My name is John Keir, and joining me as always is my co-host, Austin Davidson.
Hello.
Today, we are recording Season 5, Episode 5. We're talking offensive tackles as we lead up to the NFL Draft next month. Sports still held hostage here as we're approaching now 2 weeks without any real sports. There's still some stuff going on. WWE wrestling is going on. NASCAR had an iRacing event. I don't know if you saw any of that.
No, I didn't see any of that.
I did watch a little bit of it, and I guess they use simulators. So some of them have different setups, but a lot of them have these elaborate setups where they're like in a seat with almost like a pseudo roll cage, and they've got several monitors, and it looks pretty convincing. Some of these guys must have spent a lot of money on it. I actually used a simulator like that about 11 years ago when I was in Florida with my dad. We were visiting his girlfriend at the time, and we used these simulators. They're actually pretty realistic, although I got to be honest with you, thinking about it, it's probably a lot cheaper to do something like that. I'm not sure if these guys should want to do something like that again, because the idea of it being so much cheaper might drive people to not want to do the actual races anymore instead.
It's definitely something that could happen because it's much safer that way when it's like this. It's safe, so it could happen.
Especially in the wake of the whole Ryan Newman thing from last month too. You couple these two things together, and I think that we could be heading towards a lot more virtual stuff anyways. But at least as of this moment, NASCAR seems to be the one sport where you could do something virtual like this, and it's more convincing, a lot more of an easier transition than any other sport.
Yeah, it does make sense too.
So, that being the case, if we're talking about that, then clearly there's a whole lot of nothing going on, as is the case as COVID-19 continues to run through the world, and hope everyone is staying safe, and hopefully if you're listening to us at home, so we appreciate it as always. Let's jump right into offensive tackle. So, as we know, the Steelers' offensive line finished on a rather sour note last season, but they still got relatively good play from their two outside players in Alejandro Villanueva and Matt Feiler. Let's talk about those two guys quickly. Villanueva had another slow start like he typically does. I think this was the first time we really saw him struggle significantly, but one thing I do want to point out, even as someone who just played, going up through high school, when the person next to you is struggling to play like Ramon Foster did for good portions of this season, it does affect your play too. You play a lot better when someone good is next to you versus someone who isn't as good. So I'm wondering how much the struggles of Villanueva had to do with just him, or if they were linked to the struggles of Ramon Foster. I wonder what you think about that.
It could be compounding, like it could be both, and it just made the other worse. So I think Villanueva's going to be all right going into next season. I think that he might get better, but I don't know if I don't know if Wisniewski is going to be an improvement over Ramon Foster. We'll have to see. Based on what Chiefs fans said and what I've seen of him, he does seem like he's going to play okay. He definitely played well enough down the stretch and in the playoffs where it's most important. But that might not change still. I'm not exactly sold on it that he's just going to be instantly better than Ramon Foster. So it still might be an issue for Villanueva that he's not playing with someone that's as good. But I think he will play better going into next season.
And this is a critical year for Villanueva. He's still relatively cheap as far as tackles go, especially left tackles go. But he's heading into a point where he could be looking at a new team. He's staring free agency in the face at the end of this upcoming season. There doesn't appear to be an extension in the talks right now. So thinking about Villanueva, this could be his swan song in Pittsburgh, which is kind of hard to believe, but the turnover on the offensive line has started with Foster, and it could continue to go with Villanueva. Do you think that this could be his last year in Pittsburgh?
It easily can. If I'm seeing Eric Flowers getting $10 million a year, I'm pissed. I'm like, what the heck is that? I'm getting what was his deal? Average was $6 million per year. I know he's getting $8 million this year, but I'm pretty sure when he signed, it was an average of $6 million, right?
Something to that effect. If he's getting $8 million this year, like just a straight $8 million, then Villanueva is only earning $390,000 more. I say that like it's nothing, but I mean for them it's there's not much of a difference, and I know that the market changes obviously, but Villanueva is so many tiers better than that of Eric Flowers, so I'm sure that he would find that insulting too, and he's been a team player too, of course.
When he took that $6 million deal or whatever it was considered low for what we was expecting to have to give him. So, I mean, he's been a team player and he's done well. So for him, he kind of deserves to get paid, even if it's not with the Steelers. But it definitely needs to bounce back and have a really good season to earn that. But I mean, apparently, if you're Eric Flowers, you can get $10 million just for draft pedigree. So
I certainly could see a situation where he ends up walking because. Remember, he was in the Army for a while, so he'll be a free agent at age 32. I certainly think it's possible that he's on a different team because this will be his last good chance to make some money.
Yeah, for sure. He's getting up there in age, so it might be his last chance, might be one of his last big contracts.
And we had been talking, you had been talking about Wisniewski and the whole situation at left guard. So we're not entirely sure what's going to be going on. Now we know Wisniewski is at potentially the old B.J. Finney role. He could start, though. Other things that have been discussed include moving Matt Filer to left guard, which, remember, he was a guard coming into the league. There are some that think that he's actually a more natural guard than tackle. Or maybe even moving Chukwuma Okorafor to left guard instead. So there's a lot of moving parts here right now. I'm not sure what the best option is right now, but what I do know is that Matt Filer the last 2 seasons has played admirably at right tackle, and I'm not sure, even though he might be a better guard, I'm not sure that I necessarily want to move him if I don't have to.
I think of Sean Davis when I think of moving parts. I think of Sean Davis having a great rookie year, then having to be moved, and then just continuously moving, and then Sean Davis never lived up to his rookie year ever again. I don't like moving parts like that. I know it's a little bit different when it's an offensive lineman compared to a safety, but I do think that Matt Filer has played fine at right tackle, and I think that he's good there. I would be thinking about Chukwuma Okorafor or some other guy there instead, if that's the case. I know when Derwin Gray was drafted, they said that he might have to switch to guard, and the Steelers might be looking at him as a guard as well, so he is an option if the Steelers think he's developed well enough. But I don't like the idea of moving your starter to guard. I feel like when he's been a solid right tackle, you should just keep him at right tackle and try and find a guard instead.
Let's assume for the sake of the argument that right now Wisniewski will be slotted in at left guard, and you'll have Filer at right tackle. The Steelers have applied a second-round tender to him of roughly $3.259 million, and he'll be also a pending unrestricted free agent at the end of this upcoming season. But let's say, for the sake of argument, he's your starting right tackle. Now we'll be talking about the battle for the swing tackle position between Zach Banner, who's on a 1-year deal of his own at $1.75 million, and Chukwuma Okorafor, who was they talk about him like they really like him, but he's only played in 1 game. He only played in 1 game last season, and it was against the Rams, but that was the only game he dressed for. He was scratched for the other 15 games. And Zach Banner, the man who was thought of as a question mark to even make the roster last year and became the swing tackle. So between those 2 guys, what are we looking at the swing tackle position? I guess, like you said, it's possible Derwin Gray could end up moving to interior offensive lineman backup role, which would be interesting.
It might be Derwin Gray's better path to the roster, but with Zach Banner and Chukwuma Okorafor, that whole situation is confusing. Like you said, they talk about Chukwuma Okorafor like he is the next greatest thing, that they love him, and yet they still opt to go with Zach Banner instead, which Zach Banner I love. I think Zach Banner has played excellent at swing tackle when he comes in, and he's a fan favorite as well. On top of that, it's just, so I don't know, the words don't match the actions, and you know what they say with cliches, actions speak louder than words. To me, Banner is more valuable than Chukwuma Okorafor right now, which would make sense, which is why it would make sense for me that Chukwuma Okorafor would switch to guard instead, if they're happy with how Zach Banner is playing instead. And I like I said, Zach Banner's been pretty solid at the swing tackle position, so I like him there. Chukwuma Okorafor doesn't have that experience, and it's been, like you said, he only got to play in one game last year, so I think Okorafor should be the one to move to guard if it happens, because I think that the team does prefer Banner playing that swing tackle role.
Is this a make or break year for Okorafor, or do you think there's still a chance he could live up to his billing in his final year of his deal because he has 2 years left?
I think there's still a chance. I mean, he was a developmental guy coming out, and I mean, some guys take a really long time to develop. I mean, look at Bud Dupree. It took him to like his last year of his contract to be able to break out and have a real great year. And Bud Dupree was a first rounder. We're talking about a third rounder here. So I personally think that it could go down to the wire with Chukwuma Okorafor. I don't think if he has an unsuccessful this year that he can't be successful in the league. But yeah.
This is still a very important year for him. So obviously our eyes are going to be peeled there. But for the meantime, right now just 4 offensive tackles on the roster. Whenever Matt Filer signs his tender, he'll technically be 5. But there is, again, that potential Filer moves to guard or maybe Derwin Gray or Okorafor. So you're talking about possibly losing one of these guys. So it certainly makes it possible that the Steelers could add a tackle in the draft, or at least an offensive lineman. And when you consider that their free agency tour is kind of ended for now, I think that there's a relatively good chance the Steelers take a tackle at this point.
I think there is a good chance. I mean, there's room for depth, and you really could grab one at any point. If you want to grab a high pick one, you can. You want to grab a mid-round pick, you can. You want to grab a late-round guy, you can. It's just there's room on the roster for depth. And Derwin Gray is super replaceable. So, like, if you see another guy that's a late-round guy that you want to work with instead of Gray, you can do that instead. There's definitely room for an offensive tackle on the roster.
We have 8 different offensive tackles that we're looking at today. And Austin, I'll give a brief introduction to my 4 guys. 3 of the 4 guys that I looked at were generally considered athletic offensive tackles, and all of them started a good number of games in college. That includes Charlie Heck from North Carolina, Colton McKivitz from West Virginia, Matthew Pyert from UConn, and of course, last but not least here, Ezra Cleveland. I had accidentally misspelled it Urza, but it's Ezra Cleveland from Boise State. So I have a lot of very, very similar players to talk about, and when you're talking about players of this tier, you got guys where it's usually one thing or the other. I seem to have picked guys that were mostly athletes, but I'm looking forward to talking about them. As far as your 4 guys, what kind of players do you have?
And they're all athletic, too. That's really weird that we all got athletic ones. I got Austin Jackson from USC. I got Trey Adams from Washington. I love my Washington boys. Then I looked at Josh Jones from Houston. And then the last one I looked at was Jack Driscoll from Auburn. They're all pretty athletic. They're all pretty big besides Driscoll. And most of them are more suited towards most of them are left tackles, but Driscoll's the one right tackle that I looked at. So, yeah. Do you want to start with one of your guys?
Sure. Why don't I start? You know what? I'm actually going to start with the one trend breaker I have, somewhat anyways, and that's going to be Colton McKivitz from West Virginia. He's a redshirt senior, standing at 6'6" and 306 pounds. He's the smallest tackle I looked at. So I looked at 3 of his games, and he didn't test all that well at the combine. He was relatively slow. He didn't have a ton of bench press reps. And the one thing he did do well was a 3-cone drill, but otherwise he didn't do all that well. So that was how he did at the combine. He was a first-team All-Ohio football and basketball player as a senior in high school, and West Virginia was able to snag him from one of those Ohio schools. There's a ton of them out there. He played in 13 games and started 10 as a redshirt freshman. His play improved as a sophomore. He was all Big 12 honorable mention and started he started all possible games as a sophomore and junior, that being a combined 25 during that 2-year span. And then last season, he started 12 games at left tackle and was recognized as a third-team All-American and a second-team All-Big 12 player as a redshirt senior, despite a poor offense around him that lost an NFL quarterback in Will Grier. So, Colton McKivitz, what are the things you liked about him, or that I liked about him? He was a 4-year starter on the line at West Virginia. Other than 3 games in his redshirt freshman season, he was on the field all the time. He also split time between left tackle and right tackle. He had 1 year as a left tackle and 3 at right. And the thing that I had mentioned to Austin right away is that the thing about him that you notice is that he's got that mean streak in him that coaches love to see from offensive linemen. So that was pretty cool to see. He has pretty good, decent quickness in short areas. Like I mentioned, his 3-cone drill was pretty good. He's and this is something that I noticed with all my tackles. They're good at combination blocks. So what that is when you're double teaming a player at the line of scrimmage with another offensive lineman, and then you move up to the second level and try to get a linebacker. He's pretty good at that. They're all pretty good at that. And he finishes blocks with a physical purpose whenever he gets the chance to. Like I said, that mean streak really comes into play there. He's good at walling off defenders with hinge blocks on the backside of running plays. He has powerful hands, and he plays with good poise. He doesn't get phased by different and exotic fronts, and he gets out of his stance quickly, which is good to see because of his smaller size. But as far as the negatives go with him, he has shorter arms for someone his size. And when you consider that he's a 6'6" tackle, he's somewhat undersized for tackles, and with shorter arms, that's going to cause problems. He has tight hips, which limits his effectiveness in run blocking and setting anchors, which obviously is not good. He lacks overall strength. This is going to affect him in a ton of areas at the NFL level. And he's not a great athlete despite decent small area quickness. He's slower and isn't great in open space. I noticed that right away with him compared to the other offensive tackles I looked at. And he's probably going to struggle against NFL defensive linemen that are consistently stronger than him. His best chance to be an effective run blocker relies on him getting a good jump off the line and punching in a perfect spot off the defender. So that kind of limits his upside. So I had mentioned Austin. I really liked his tape early on, but as time went on, I wasn't really liking what I was seeing. He's got versatile starting experience, and he has the ferocity that you like, but there's just too many issues at this point when it comes to his strength, length, and overall athleticism. I don't think he has a future as a left tackle, and quite frankly, I'm not sure he'll stick at right tackle either. He might have to move to guard, depending on how much that length and lack of play strength holds him back. But all that being said, I think Colton McKivitz is going to have a place in this league, at least competing as a reserve backup. It'll take some time for him, though. He definitely should not be playing right away, and I think he is a solid day 3 pick. If the Steelers ended up with him, I wouldn't hate it, but this isn't a guy that should be anything more than your 8th or 9th offensive lineman at best as of this point. But, he could certainly develop into something over time, but not right now. So that was Colton McKivitz from West Virginia, 4-year starter for the Mountaineers. Which guy do you want to start talking about, Austin?
I'm going to follow your lead and take the black sheep from the pack, and I'm going to start with Jack Driscoll from Auburn. He's 6'5" and 306 pounds. He came out of high school in Connecticut and decided to stay relatively close after earning a scholarship from the University of Massachusetts back in 2015. After redshirting the first season, he was able to start 8 games at both left guard and right tackle. In his sophomore season, he started all 12 games at the right tackle spot and then graduated from UMass in just 3 years, making him eligible to transfer and play for 2 more seasons, and that took him to Auburn. His transition was smooth as he's able to start at right tackle for Auburn all 13 games in both his junior and senior season, and following that last season, he declared for the draft. So starting with what's great about Driscoll is that he was a 4-year starter between both UMass and Auburn, so he has tons of game experience and even got to play in different systems, showing he could handle change to a higher level between going from UMass to Auburn. The best thing about him, though, is his overall quickness. He was actually the 4th fastest offensive lineman at the Combine, and you can see he has pretty good acceleration in his play. He comes quick out of his stance, and combining that with his lateral agility makes him able to handle zone blocking duties easily. Then when it comes to kick slide blocks, he steps right into them with an instant burst, and he can continue sliding his feet to be able to mirror in all directions. Speaking of his feet, he has nimble feet to go along with the speed that allows him to redirect inside and recover against counters. Then he showed he's athletic enough to be able to do counter pulls from the backside tackle spot. Last thing is that he has good recognition of when to turn it upfield, and he's composed up to the second level blocks with the ability to adjust if he has to. Going to the bad side of things, I think the biggest knocks against Driscoll are going to be coming from his size. There are size problems that he can fix, such as his musculation, where he needs to get a lot more on his core and his arms. And then there's the problem that can't be fixed, and that's his arm length. His wingspan just isn't that big, and these things... I'm sorry. And these things, both the strength and the length, were often the base of Driscoll's struggles. For starters, he struggled to get a good punch and control in passing downs, anchoring, and unable to get rushers out of his frame and lock them out. Then he fails to get much leverage and drives his legs to generate movement. He fails to get much leverage and fails to drive his legs to generate movement. So he tends to just sit in place with his legs straight because that's how he tries to anchor down. Then against power rushers, he struggles again because he doesn't have the pure power to redirect these edge rushers. Then there are some things that don't necessarily tie into either his strength or length, and those are that he places his hands inconsistently in the run game, and also he hurries his kick slides, and this leads to oversets at times. So, as it stands, he may have to switch over to guard, and that may actually work out for him, as he may be successful as a pulling guard with speed, but he could also offer that Chris Hubbard flexibility of being a guard or tackle at the NFL level. Fact of the matter is there were talks about Steelers' Derwin Gray, who came out of school as an offensive tackle, that he should move to guard instead. He was both stronger, bigger in terms of weight, and has longer arms than Driscoll does. Driscoll is taller and faster than Derwin Gray, but he really has to put on weight if he wants to remain a tackle at the NFL level. If he can put on somewhere between 10 to 15 pounds, he may be able to handle it, but we'll have to see how that influences his speed. Anyway, to me, Driscoll projects as a mid-4th to early 5th rounder because with some added mass, I think he could end up as a really solid backup, maybe the next B.J. Finney or Chris Hubbard. With that being said, he compares pretty well to Chris Hubbard. I went back to look because I was surprised. I had no idea Chris Hubbard plays at under 300 pounds. To play tackle at under 300 pounds at the NFL level is so difficult. I didn't know Chris Hubbard was under 300. So it is possible that Driscoll might not even have to add any weight, because if you go back, Driscoll isn't even under 300. Driscoll sits at 306 pounds. And Chris Hubbard's actually shorter. Chris Hubbard is 6'4", and Driscoll is 6'5". So overall, and one more thing, Chris Hubbard actually had shorter arms too, and he made it work. I said Driscoll had short arms. He has a wingspan of 33. Chris Hubbard had a wingspan of 32. So honestly, Driscoll might make it work without having to add weight, but he could really do with a little bit more weight on his arms in terms of muscle and stuff. So I think it would still be better, but I was surprised to see that Chris Hubbard was sub 300 pounds. That was really interesting. But that was Jack Driscoll out of Auburn. Who is your next prospect?
I'm going to take a look at Ezra Cleveland from Boise State at 6'6" and 300 pounds. He's one of those guys that tested really well at the combine. He was top 5 in the 3-cone drill, 20-yard shuttle, 40-yard dash, and bench press. So of the 6 things that we ranked him with, he finished top 5 in 4 of those, and he was first in the 3-cone drill and the 20-yard shuttle. So he's a really good athlete. A little bit about him. He's from Washington, all-Washington defensive lineman in high school. He also played offensive line and wrestled. The coaches seemed to like him better on the offensive side, even though he produced a ton as a defensive lineman. So once he got to college, he was a full-time offensive lineman. And because of the transition, they decided to redshirt him in 2016. But starting in his redshirt freshman season, they stuck him at left tackle, and they kept him there. He started 14 games there in 2017, was an All-Mountain West honorable mention that year, then started 13 games the next season and was a first-team All-Mountain West selection, and then duplicated his performance and accolades as a redshirt junior in 2019. I should mention he declared for the draft, so he's not a senior, he's a redshirt junior. So he technically has been there 4 years, but is technically a junior. So Ezra Cleveland is another one of those shorter tackles that I looked at in this draft, but he's got a stocky frame with a good lower center of gravity that gives him the leverage advantage when it comes to dealing with bigger defenders. I noticed that he's pretty good at picking up stunts along with his fellow left guard. It kind of goes with what I was talking about with Austin earlier about that whole working in conjunction with your fellow left guard. He doesn't get phased with guys trying to cross his face, and he seals off backside blocks effectively. He's got quick feet and is another one of those guys that gets out of his stance quickly, works to the second level well. I liked his technique and pass protection. He can re-anchor on the fly, and he has loose hips that work well with those quick feet. But obviously there's some bad that comes with the good, and as is the case with most of these guys, his play strength is an issue right now. His punch is also lacking strength, making it easier for defenders to shed him. He did get beat on the inside more than you'd like, and I've always said, and I will continue to say, that for offensive linemen, getting beat to your inside gap is a cardinal sin. That's the one thing you cannot allow. And speed to power rushers in particular gave him fits, so that's something to look out for because you will obviously see that at the NFL level. He also opens up too early in pass sets, which is kind of what allows him to get beat on the inside because he'll play his hand too quickly, giving the rusher opposite him time to set up a move. He's also the opposite of Colton McKivitz, where he doesn't like to finish his run blocks, and he kind of lets up rather than finishing with nasty pancake blocks. I mentioned the issues with his play strength and his punch lacking strength. The timing is just off. And with weaker hands, if you're not going to establish if you have weaker hands already and then your punch timing is off, that's just compounding issues already. And if he doesn't get a good pop off the line of scrimmage, he's not going to push defenders way back into the secondary. So he really needs to be reliant on getting off the ball quickly, which is not always going to happen. So as for Cleveland, in conclusion, an athletic left tackle that only played left tackle. The thing that stuck out to me with him is that he can get to any part of the field that you need him to in order to make blocks. But he has issues with speed to power rushers. That was kind of concerning to see. One thing that I did notice, though, according to NFL.com, was that he suffered a turf toe injury in the second game of the 2019 season and didn't participate in most practices that season because of it. He was just playing games. So it's honestly hard to know how much that turf toe injury impacted his play last season. I did like his tape, and when you factor in that he was dealing with an injury and was playing through it, that made me like his tape a little bit more because he still played relatively well. I think a swing tackle role is definitely not out of the question for Cleveland, assuming he has recovered from his injury. But unless if he can get stronger, he's not going to become a starter, at least not right away. I think he's a round 3 to 4 guy at this point, and again, that great athleticism could potentially have him move to guard. I know the Steelers love their versatile guys, and even though he didn't play anything besides left tackle, when you can move like that, you know how the Steelers like to have their guys pull. Maybe that would make sense for Ezra Cleveland. So just something to think about. But anyhow, the Boise State product, standing at 6'6", Ezra Cleveland. That was all about him. So Austin, let's move on to your next prospect. Who do you want to talk about?
Talk about Trey Adams from Washington. He is 6'8" and 318 pounds. Adams doesn't have NFL connections, but his father was drafted by the Kansas City Royals in 1987 and played in the minors for 3 years. Adams was a Washington local, coming out of high school as an all-state player and decided to play for his local team. As a true freshman, he was able to start immediately 9 of the 10 games he played in, missing the final 2 games of the season with an injury. That, for some reason, I couldn't find anywhere what exactly that injury was. I tried Googling it, and I couldn't figure out what the actual injury in his first year was. So it's just an unknown injury, apparently. Then, in his sophomore season, he was able to stay on the field all 14 games and earned himself first team All Pac-12 honors for his left tackle play. Then, as a junior, he was having another promising year, starting the first 7 games at left tackle, but he then suffered an ACL tear that caused him to miss the rest of the season. If that wasn't enough, going into the next season, he ended up having to have surgery for a bulging disc in his back, and that was right before the next season started. This led him to miss all but 4 games. He was able to return in 2019 and had as much as a comeback as he could hope for. He played in every game for the Huskies and then also got first team All Pac-12 honors. So starting with his positives. Of all the games I watched, those being against Arizona, California, Oregon, and 2 minutes of Ohio State, I never saw him let his assignment get to the runner. So I think what Adams is best at is run blocking. At least now, his older tape was better at pass blocking, but now it seems like he's a really solid run blocking tackle. What's also really good about him is his balance. He has a really good body control to be able to bend and adjust in space, and his balance and posture are both consistent when blocking. And I liked how he used his hands, being patient to land with accurate block fits while also working hard to make sure he gets his hands right if he loses positioning. He's a pretty good hand fighter. Then he showed enough athleticism to handle move blocks, and has shown he can jump set edge speed to alter rushers' game plan. Last thing is that he's broad through the hips and waist, so that's good. Now going to the negatives, I have to say I can't really remember the combine hurting someone quite as much as it hurt Trey Adams in my mind. He really should have elected to do nothing and not participate in the combine, seeing as out of all linemen, not just tackles, all offensive linemen, he was the worst or tied for worst in the 40-yard dash, vertical jump, and broad jump. Like, it's very difficult to be the worst at three different spots, and really the vertical and broad don't really matter, but the 40-yard dash, that sucks. That hurts a lot. But it's tough when you're with all offensive linemen. This isn't just tackles. He was the worst of all offensive linemen. And then what I most wanted to see was his bench press, and he didn't do it. So overall, his combine was bad. And I'm assuming his bench would have been very lackluster. His bench was probably not going to be that big because he has an underdeveloped chest. He needs to add some weight there. It's why he probably didn't participate in the combine. And on tape, you can really see it against bull rushers and really anyone that uses force against him, power rushers as well. He struggles against them because he doesn't have the strength to really handle it, and he could be this could be a lasting concern, as his injuries are what a lot of people believe caused him to lose his strength. As in 2016, people believed he was the most talented tackle in football, so he may never be able to fix these problems. Compounding with that injury issue is teams questioning his long-term durability. He had a couple of major surgeries in his college career, and there's overall concern with that history in mind. I mean, you have an ACL tear, you have a back surgery, it's going to be rough, and then there's that mystery, whatever freshman year injury that happened that I still don't know what it is. So there's a lot of injury history with him. Then I felt like his play was labored, especially in second halves of games. It just seemed like high motor pass rushers were able to eventually overwhelm him by the end, and it caused his length to not matter as much as the game went on because he was slow. This also causes the outside half to break down, allowing rushers to corner and flatten to the quarterback. Something else shown on tape is that he could be pulled out of position by smart hand fighters like Chase Young, for example. To be fair to him, for a second, Chase Young was one of the best pass rushers in the country, but that's what the NFL is like. It's just you're going to be versing the best pass rushers in basically the whole world. Really, it's the United States, but the whole world. It's going to be tough like that. You might not verse like a Chase Young every game or a Von Miller every game, but it's going to be close. Another thing about him is that he is so slow and he is literally useless on any type of screens and pulling plays. Literally all wide receiver screens went to the opposite side of the field that he was on. And if a screen was going to his side of the field, he was literally taken off the field and put a backup was put on instead. Definitely a turnoff that he's incapable pull blocker in my mind. Last thing is he will need to really work on his inside hands and grip power to be able to make up for his lack of strength and be able to press and redirect defenders who get to his edge. Lloyd is compared him to Matt Cleland. I don't quite see it, but I don't have a better comparison. I think he's best suited as a right tackle at the NFL level, although he's played all his snaps at left tackle. I just don't trust him in I don't trust his pass blocking skills as much as I trust his run blocking. So I wouldn't put him on the blind side, even though that's where he's played most of his college career. He's projected as a late second, early third round pick, but I see him more as a fourth round pick, if not an early fifth round pick, as I think there's a lot of concerns with not only his game, but there's durability concerns. And while I'll see that, and we have seen players take quite a hit because their durability or how long they can play is in question. Maurice Hurst is an extreme example, the defensive tackle that's out with the Raiders, but he was considered a first round pick, and he fell all the way to the fifth round pick because people said he might have to retire. It's not quite the same here. I don't think anything's going to threaten Trey Adams to make him retire, but it is still a concern. So I personally would not take Adams before the fourth round. It just doesn't make sense to me. There is a lot of potential with a guy's size and with his run blocking abilities, but he needs time to develop and work on his other stuff and gain strength. So that was Trey Adams. I watched his tape versus Arizona, versus California, and versus Oregon again. Which prospect would you like to look at next?
I'm going to start with, I'll go with Charlie Heck from North Carolina, a redshirt senior standing at 6'8" and 311 pounds. He's the tallest tackle that I looked at. Another one of those really good athletes. Charlie Heck, for him, football is a family thing. So his father not only was a former All-American tackle and first-round pick out of Notre Dame, he's actually the offensive line coach of the Kansas City Chiefs. And his brother John was a 4-year starter at North Carolina in the past as well. So football runs in the bloodlines for him, and we know that the Steelers are all about that stuff. He's a former All-Missouri high school player, as most of these guys are. All-state players. He redshirted in 2015, then was a reserve, played in 8 games his redshirt freshman season, started 11 of 12 games at right tackle during the 2017 season, then became the full-time starter in every game and in the 2018 season at right tackle, and then was asked to move to left tackle last season and started 12 games there, and he was a second-team All-ACC selection there in 2019. So other than the football bloodlines, which are an obvious positive for him, you just have to look at him. I mean, he's a massive man, and there's room to add muscle to his frame. He's athletic, and the Tar Heels used him on the move quite often. You usually see guards on the move more than anyone else. They actually were not afraid to pull him from the left tackle position, and he did a much better job at it than, say, someone like Colton McKivitz, who, he could move, just not nearly as good as Charlie Heck or some of these other tackles could. He's pretty good leverage for someone that's 6'8". I mean, it can only be so good, but it's relatively good for someone his size. He has a good feel for working to the second level. I need to stop saying that because that's the case with all these guys. But he's got good hand use and pass pro, decent pass protection technique in setting up his anchor, and he uses his plus athleticism to recover in reps where he was beaten early. But on the other side, his height will work against him in the NFL level, as opposed to the college ranks if he doesn't bulk up a little bit more. He's not overly strong, so that's an issue right now. And scouts aren't convinced that him adding bulk isn't going to slow him down. So if he slows down because he adds bulk, that could take away from one of his greatest assets going into this process. And that lack of play strength, it was an issue in college, which for some reason he also had an issue with his center of balance, and it led to problems in him setting up his anchor so he could get bumped off a lot. So it's only going to get worse at the NFL level if he doesn't get stronger. And he got beaten on inside moves way, way, way too much, more than anyone else that I looked at. He's susceptible to counter rush moves and pass protection, and even though he does have a strong punch, or a relatively effective punch, it's slow. It's just a step slow, so that's a problem. So all in all, Charlie Heck, he's got the football bloodlines, he's got the size, the experience at both tackle positions in college. He's got a lot of desirable qualities that NFL teams covet. However, his technique and current play strength is just not where it needs to be to play in the NFL right away. Work in the weight room and good coaching, possibly from his father, look for him in the Chiefs possibly. I think he could make a good swing tackle in the NFL for most NFL offenses down the line. But for now, he's better suited as a raw backup. I'd expect Heck to be an early day 3 pick, possibly late day 2, for a team that can't really ignore his size. Because, I mean, you're talking about a guy with fantastic athleticism that's 6'8". You don't get that every day. So it'll be hard to ignore Charlie Heck. But I'd think about it. But there are some issues when you're talking about him right now. So that was Charlie Heck, my number 3 tackle, the third one I was looking at. And you have one more or 2 more? I know you looked at Adams and Driscoll, right?
Yes, I got 2 more, and I'm going to go with Josh Jones from Houston. He's 6'5" and 319 pounds. While he doesn't have the NFL ties, his father did play and coach semi-pro football with the Houston Buccaneers and the Katy Cowboys. I've never heard of it either. I don't know what league that's in, but apparently it's a thing. Josh Jones was only a 3-star recruit coming out of Richmond, Texas, and had originally committed to Oklahoma. However, then Houston head coach Tom Herman tried his hardest at keeping local talent around and was able to get Jones to reverse course and stay in Houston. He redshirted his first year in Houston, but was able to become a full-time starter at left tackle for all 13 games in his next season. And then in the following season, head coach Herman left for Texas, but Jones decided to stay in Houston. And he was able to start 10 games at left tackle, missing 2 games due to injury. In his junior season, he was able to return to starting all 13 games, but was considered a huge snub after not being named an All-AAC pick at all. In his senior year, he probably would have earned first-team All-Conference, but missed the rest of the season after the first 9 games with a knee injury. Still, though, he was able to earn second-team All-Conference pick and then declared for the draft. So, one of the first things I noticed about Jones is that he's an absolute stud once he gets to the second level. It's like once he gets speed, he is going to lay some blocks. It was mostly in his 2019 tape, but man, I should say quickly, for some reason, Houston doesn't have a lot of tape. I had to go back to 2018 to watch some 2018 tape, and I have to say his 2018 tape wasn't as impressive, but it still was. Anyway, the dude plays with such a nasty field demeanor. He gets upfield and blocks. It's just once he gets moving, he can just block people completely out of plays. As a whole, he is suited for a system that is move-oriented, I said that right. As he was pulled and moved around in the field a lot in the 2019 season, but he was very good at working as a lead blocker and getting up the field. Then he has got good length and athleticism to be an NFL left tackle with room to add additional mass to help compete with the higher level of competition. The length and athleticism helps with his bend and also allows him to be able to get difficult reach blocks on both the play side and the back side. Then announcers, analysts, and coaches have said that he has improved greatly throughout his entire career and sometimes greatly throughout seasons, as even though his hand placement is not perfect, it is getting better. And also, a lot of his issues are considered to be coachable and improvable once he gets to work with NFL coaches. Last couple things I wanted to mention is that he's actually had pretty decent game speed, coming quick out of his stance, and had some pretty great acceleration when pulling. And he showed good lateral slide speed and smoothness to be able to handle mirroring duties. And lastly, he got some snaps at guard on the tape I watched, so he has a little experience there as well. That was from 2018, though. I don't know if he did it in 2019, but he did play a few snaps at guard in the end of one of the... Which game was it? It was at the end of USF against... wait, what? Oh, I'm confused myself. It was USF 2018. I wrote 2019, yeah. The University of South Florida got to play some guard snaps at the end of the game. Negatives. To start off, he is the only prospect that I looked at that I saw get a penalty when I was watching his tape. There was a false start in his 2019 game against Oklahoma. It really was just luck of the draw, but I figured I should mention it anyway. The thing that really stuck out with me with Jones is he has plenty of problems with his technique, footwork, and hand placement. Mostly in pass protection, but really in all areas. He can be too slow in letting his hands go, stopping the length that he has from ever being a factor, and that might be because he doesn't have the greatest core strength, and because of that, he has inconsistent body control. Going back to his footwork, though, his punch would be a lot more effective if he anchored... I'm sorry. I lost my play. I lost my place so bad. Something fell and then I got distracted. But anchored down and got his feet set. That's what I was going to say. His punch would be a lot more effective if he anchored down and got his feet set. But also I felt like he was slow in getting his hands out. I think he'll need to show better acceleration into the punch if he wants to be a better drive blocker. Speaking of anchoring, it can also be tough for him at times because he bends his waist too much, leading to inconsistent anchoring versus bull rushers. Last couple things are that he has to improve his understanding of angles as a move blocker, specifically on run plays, and his pass sets has shown to be disjointed with an early shoulder turn against edge speed. Overall, Lance Zierlein compared him to Bears' Bobby Massey, which actually is a decent comparison, other than Massey being a tiny bit bigger. But yeah, that would be a solid career too. Jones ended up like Massey, as Massey's going to go into his 9th NFL season overall. Overall, I liked what Jones had to offer. His team was easily the best of all the guys I watched. Even his 2018 team, which wasn't as good, was pretty solid. Any other year, I think Jones is a top 16 pick, but because this draft is loaded with some really solid tackles like Mekhi Becton and Tristan Wirfs, I see Jackson as a late round 1 guy to possibly even early round 2. And if he does get to round 2, it'd be an absolute steal for a team in my eyes because a lot of his negatives just need to be coached up. And if he adds a little mass to his core in the offseason, he is instantly better. So, again, this was Josh Jones out of Houston. I watched his games versus Oklahoma in 2019, versus Cincinnati in 2019, and versus USF in 2018. Who is your final prospect?
All right, my last prospect is going to be Matthew Pyart from Connecticut, redshirt senior at 6'7" and 318 pounds. Another one of those athletic guys is formerly from Jamaica. Pyart moved to New York City when he was 4 years old, but he was primarily a basketball player until he got to high school. Signed on with UConn in 2015. And they redshirted him, seeing his potential, but the fact of the matter was he wasn't quite in football shape because he had been mostly playing basketball. They decided to put him at offensive tackle and let him bulk up, adding 40 pounds in his first year on campus. This paid off right away in 2016. He started 12 games at left tackle and was able to duplicate his starts and performance at 2017, and then moved to right. There are conflicting reports here, by the way. As a junior, it says on NFL.com he moved to right tackle, but on the UConn website it says he moved to right tackle, but on NFL.com it said he moved to guard as a junior. He did start 12 games again. Maybe he split time at both. I'm not entirely sure. And then last season, he was an all-AAC selection, starting 12 games at right tackle. So that was pretty cool to see. The positives for him, he'd be slender man, except bulky for an offensive lineman. He's got huge arms at 36.5 inches long, over 36.5 inches long, and he has the potential to add more weight and strength to his frame, and scouts think that even adding this will not take away from his athleticism, which is good to see. He's got great lateral movement, and he's an asset on toss plays, sweeps, stretches, and other outside runs. He learned how to loosen his hips throughout his college career, and he really showed it in his tape. He has quick feet allowing for better down blocks and a better finish. He has swing tackle flexibility and started all 4 years at UConn. So there's a lot to like with Matthew Pyart. But as of right now, his play strength, just like everyone else that I looked at apparently, is not great right now. He can't fully extend his punch, thus neutralizing his naturally long arms. He's not a great blocker on inside runs, particularly runs to his inside gap, the B gap on the right side. He misses his punch in pass pro and doesn't have that nasty edge that someone like Colton McKivitz has. He also stops churning his feet during the play as it progresses, causing him to lose elongated battles with engaged defenders. His poor hand placement gives edge rushers a chance to push or pull him off balance during hand fighting. So my final thoughts about Pyart. I really like this tape. He's one of the more interesting prospects I've looked at to this point. He projects as a project tackle, kind of like Chukwuma Okorafor, with fantastic athleticism and a good frame that can add muscle and weight while possibly not losing any speed or agility. However, even though most of his technical issues can be corrected by coaching, there's a lot of scouts that are kind of questioning just how much better he can really become, because even though he seems to have a high ceiling, he's already played in 48 games in college. I mean, he started every possible game he could have. Does he still have room to grow? Probably, yes, but probably doesn't have the same type of ceiling that Chukwuma Okorafor was thought to have had when he was coming out 2 years ago. Even though he still didn't play a ton of football growing up, I do think that not playing in those young formative years can be a detriment, so I'm not as concerned about that right now. His athleticism and size is pretty hard to ignore. I'd be honestly shocked if he isn't drafted by the end of the third round. So Matthew Pyart was certainly one of the more interesting guys I've ever looked at, but his tape really shined to me. So that being said, last guy you're talking about is Josh Jones?
It's Austin Jackson from USC.
Oh, my
Austin
apologies.
Oh, sorry. Were you going to say something?
I just said my apologies. I knew it was either Jones or Jackson. I got confused with this whole mess that I have with this tank filter. I apologize.
You know what's funny? I think Jackson and for some reason I was confusing Jackson Jones too. I think because USC and Houston's colors are like pretty close. But regardless, Austin Jackson from USC. He's 6'5" and 322 pounds. Jackson has NFL ties, with his father Melvin Jackson having played for the Green Bay Packers for 5 years following his national championship victory with USC in 1974. And we all know how the Steelers feel about NFL ties when it comes to drafting a prospect. So coming out of high school, he was a USA Today All-American and decided to follow in his father's footsteps and go to USC. In his freshman year, he played in all 14 games as a reserve and on special teams. then in his sophomore season, he got to take on the starting role for all 12 games of the year. His 2019 season, however, is where he really shined, and it came after a very stressful summer for him where he had to donate bone marrow to his younger sister. He was able to start all 13 games at left tackle and received all Pac-12 notice for his play. Following his junior season, he declared for the draft, deciding to forego his senior season. And starting with his positives, I was glad there was tape of him against a potential first-round pick. There aren't many edge rushers in this draft. There's not a lot that are considered first-round worthy, but one of those is going to be A.J. Espinosa, and one of the tape I got to see is against him. It helped me gauge him better. I found that overall he won the battle against Espinosa. He did get beat a couple of times, but there was times where he was pancaking Espinosa. It was a back-and-forth battle, as you'd expect with two guys of very high caliber. Anyhow, his build is pretty solid already, giving him outstanding athleticism, but there is also room for additional mass development if he chooses. The athleticism helps with his recovery if he ever gets speed, and his recovery is pretty solid because of that. Pass protection is where I felt like he did the best. He was able to run rushers up and around the pocket a few times on tape. That's not the only good thing about it. He has the ability to redirect against counters, use a splash technique to get the rushers off balance, showed some really good bend and pop as a drive blocker, and shown he is able to be used on long pulls and wide receiver screens. He can also get to the second level quickly on cutoff blocks, and finally, he can provide some special teams help, but not in the place you're probably thinking, but rather on the defensive line, because he blocked 2 kicks while at USC and 5 kicks while in high school, so 7 kicks total since high school days. Going to his negatives, the first thing I noticed with Jackson is he plays with a pad level a little too high, and it caused him to get walked back by better competition, and that better competition being A.J. Espinosa. Then I felt like he struggled a lot with using his arms and hands. He is slow to get them up, and it seems like defenders are getting their hands on him first. He doesn't really ever put his hands to the inside on tape, which diminishes his power that he has. And he's not even the strongest either. He had 24 bench press reps, which it wasn't a bottom performance, but he was not anywhere close to top 5 either. His hand placement isn't even really good. He doesn't get them right to be able to hold on and steer a defender. These problems just get compounded with the fact that he needs to add some more upper body and core strength. Or maybe that's the root of the problem, but regardless, he could do with some more strength. Then something I really, really disliked on tape was that, and I said this to John, is that he gave up the inside on more than one occasion. The first time was against Espinosa, projected late first-round pick, so I gave him a bit of a pass. But it happened a couple times against Utah as well, and I think once against Fresno State, but I can't remember. This typically came against speed, so my concern is that he struggles with speed rushers, like a Bud Dupree. Then I saw some problems with his balance and footwork. He overextends, and this causes his base width to constantly change, and also he hunches forward into his punch line. Then his footwork can be jumpy and undisciplined. And the final thing I have to say is that I think his run blocking needs some work. There wasn't a lot of tape on it. It mostly came from the Fresno State game that I watched, but the little I saw, I think his run blocking wasn't as good as his pass blocking. So overall, Jackson to me projects as a day 2 pick. He's still a little raw. The frame and athletic ability are there, but I found a lot of technique issues, and seeing him giving up the inside a few times on tape was just bad for me. There is promise there, though. I saw he could at least fare okay against round 1 pass rushing talent, so there's a lot to work with, and if he improves his strength, he can even be turned into a big guard at the NFL level if the team wants to. But as I said, he doesn't project as a first-round pick to me in this great class of tackles. He seems to be an early second-round pick to me, which honestly, since early second round would likely be all the guys that took the tackles in the first round, it's probably going to be a mid-second-round pick or a late second-round pick because of that. But regardless, again, that was Austin Jackson from USC. And I watched his tape against Iowa 2019 versus Utah 2019 and versus Fresno State 2019. And that's all of you rank your players by how you see them fit and their value.
I'm going to start with Matthew Pyert. It's probably not a secret based on the way I was just talking about him, but I think it's the best of both worlds when it comes to him. He's not only a great athlete with good experience, but he's also got room to improve. And even though his play strength is not where it needs to be, experts think that he can add some without losing his speed. That's what separates him from the other guys I looked at, and having great size and arm length certainly helps as well. Next is Charlie Heck. He's raw and lacking strength, but good size and athleticism gives you something to work with. I'd only take him if he's available on day 3. Ezra Cleveland is another great athlete. I liked his tape a good bit, especially when considering he was dealing with an injury for almost all of the 2019 season. He does have a chance to get better. He's another guy I'd consider. And then last is Colton McKivitz. He has decent tape and good experience, but just has too many issues and is lacking in other areas with limited upside. If he's around late day 3, I'd say go ahead, otherwise don't bother. I don't really think he fits in anywhere well at this time. He's more of a project guy, again, with limited upside, so what's really the point unless if you're taking a flyer? That's how I see my 4 guys.
With me, it was tough for me to decide who I wanted as my top number 1. I settled on Josh Jones. Real deal. I doubt he will be there for the Steelers' first pick. Tape, I think he'd be a solid starter. I did reach a little bit because I do like to, just in case, make a reach because you never know who's going to be there. Well, it might have been 2 years ago, but I believe it was last year. You think of like Jamar Taylor from Alabama. He was like projected to the Jaguars at what, 6? Like all the mock drafts had Jamar Taylor at 6, and then the draft comes by, and then Jamar Taylor's still there at like 24, and they're like, when are they going to take him? And you get into the second round, and he's still not taken. And the Jaguars are able to get a guy that they were projected to take with the 6th overall pick in the second round. So I always like to consider that. And it's another one that's similar to the Steelers is James Washington. I never thought James Washington would be there for the Steelers pick, but it just so happens that, as I just pointed out for Austin Jackson, I was talking about how the early guys are probably all going to take tackles. If these guys get to the second round, chances are they're going to get to the mid-second round because guys like the Jets and stuff early on would have probably taken a tackle in the first round, and they're not going to take a second tackle. I mean, they could, but chances aren't high. So Jones, to me, I loved his tape. I think he'd be a solid starter. Don't know if he'll be there for the Steelers, but I looked at him anyway, and he was my favorite. After him was close second was Jack Driscoll. Much different draft pedigree. Driscoll's going to go much later, but with his time in Pittsburgh, and I love Driscoll for the same reasons. All Driscoll needs to do is add more muscle, and the man is going to end up a steal in this draft. I see great value in Driscoll. I see that this is a guy that the Steelers could use like the next Chris Hubbard or BJ Finney. He could be taken late, and he's a guy that just develops into a great backup guy, and maybe use it to start every once in a while. I love Driscoll. I liked his tape. I liked everything. Then after that was Austin Jackson. There's some promise, but it's not where I'd want the Steelers to go with their second round pick if he's there. I feel like he's not. I feel like other people are higher on him than I am. I'm just not as in love with his tape as I was the others. And I was a fan. And last but not least is Trey Adams. I hated his tape. I've over the time while doing this podcast, I've really loved Washington players. I don't know why, it's just how it's been. I gravitated towards them. And I was really sad that I hated Trey Adams. There wasn't anything to really lay my head on with him. I feel like a lot of people are overvaluing him because of his early 2016 and 2017 tape where he was considered one of the best tackles in the league, in the NCAA. But I just think that you can't go in the past. You have to go with what you see now, and I didn't see much on tape. I saw a tackle that really struggled in pass blocking sets that really didn't offer much other than being really big. So I was not a fan of Trey Adams. I would not be a fan of the Steelers took him. I see his value way lower than other people see his value. But yeah, so that wraps up tackles. You have anything, closing thoughts on the tackle class or anything?
Not at this time. Let's transition into news with some breaking news for us, and that's that the Carolina Panthers have released Cam Newton. They've made that official, so he is now a free agent.
Yeah, man, it's about right. You couldn't trade him. His contract's untradeable. I mean, he was cleared by Atlanta, cleared in Atlanta from a doctor saying that his foot and everything is healthy, foot and shoulder. So, I mean, good luck to him finding a team. There's still teams that need a quarterback. Chargers team focused on just drafting one and rolling with Ty God, and the Patriots still need one too, but they don't have money. So, I mean, we'll see where Cam Newton fits in.
Patriots are tanking for Trevor.
So, all right. You ready to go through some fast Steelers NFL news? There's a lot of stuff that happened.
Yeah, I was going to say, what do you want to make the bigger talking points? Because we could probably expand on a few of these.
I think Steelers stuff first that we didn't talk about. First, the Steelers re-signed long snapper Cameron Kennedy to a new 2-year deal. Dangerfield to a new 1-year deal. The Steelers replaced Ryan Shazier on the reserve retired list. This is because his contract will no longer toll, and this is how the Steelers can continue giving him medical benefits through the team. He's not officially said that he will retire yet. His contract was no longer tolling, and then people are still saying that Jameis Winston will go to the Steelers, which honestly is still dumb. It's getting increasingly a little bit more likely though, and it's only because people aren't viewing Jameis Winston as a starter, and that really surprised me. I thought Jameis Winston showed better tape than like Nick Foles and stuff. I know it's like he threw 30 touchdowns, 30 interceptions, but he's not expected to get a starting job this year, and that's really weird to me. I still think he's out of the Steelers' price range by a mile, but he's not considered a starter by most teams. So, what do you have to say about all that Steelers stuff?
I'd be shocked if it happened because you can't afford him, and I don't know why he'd want to sign somewhere where he's not going to be able to play for at least 2 years. I just don't think that makes sense for him. I mean, I think for his career it would be a smart move, but I don't think it's a good idea to have to sign him on. And when you think about all the legal issues he's had before, he's had 4 different incidents. You might be able to live with that when he's your starting quarterback, but you don't put up with that for a backup.
Man, I wouldn't. I agree, dude. I just think it's dumb.
He's also said not too long ago that he still has thoughts about playing baseball. I wouldn't rule out him deciding to just give baseball a try at this point if no one brings him in to compete.
The Tim Tebow route. I respect it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of money in baseball too, and maybe this just isn't it for him. I don't know. I just don't think that it makes sense for Pittsburgh right now. They've said it all offseason. Tomlin, Colbert, Art Rooney, they're happy with the quarterbacks they have.
I am happy with them too, so I think that this is the right move. All right, now let's get into some big NFL news. We're only going to talk about a few things, and it's mostly in order here. So the big thing I think that most people talk about is the Buccaneers won, in quotes, the race for Tom Brady, signing him to a 2-year, $50 million deal that is fully guaranteed and includes $9 million in incentives and a no-trade clause. And those $9 million incentives are additional. He gets $4.5 million incentives each year to go along with the $25 million contract. There's also no franchise tag clause as well, so he can't be kept following this contract via the franchise tag. So what do you think of that?
Well, good for Tom Brady getting to go somewhere else. I don't know. I think that's a lot of money for a game manager with a pop gun arm, but he does have better weapons in Tampa Bay than he did in New England last year. I still don't think that's a good football team. I'd be shocked if they made the playoffs.
I mean, you're in a tough division. I mean, you're with the Saints, you're with the Buccaneers. Not with the Buccaneers. You're with the Panthers, and you're with the Falcons. It's just tough to beat out the Saints there. The Falcons got better, and the Panthers now have Teddy Bridgewater. I mean, the Panthers don't really have anyone else, but
Teddy Bridgewater's a better quarterback right now than Tom Brady is. I'm not sorry.
I agree, but it is what it is. So, I mean, it's just going to be tough for the Buccaneers to find a path to the
Are they really
playoffs,
do they really he is a better quarterback in my opinion than Jameis Winston, but how much better? They won 7 games last year. Is he good enough to make them a 9-win team?
Maybe. I don't see it, but maybe.
I don't know.
That's what I was saying. But all right, let's go to we're basically going to talk about a bunch of trades, and that's it. And then I'll run through some quick things that we won't even discuss. I'll just talk about them. But I want to talk about the AFC North trade that the Baltimore Ravens made that wasn't Calais Campbell. They traded Hayden Hurst and a 4th-round pick to the Falcons for a 2nd-round pick and a 5th-round pick. What do you think of that?
It's nice because it makes tight end less of a need for the Falcons, but now that the Steelers have also signed Eric Ebron, I guess tight end isn't really a big need for the Steelers either. Hurst was a mistake in the 1st round, and I think the Ravens notice that now, and they've got their tight end in Mark Andrews anyways, so good for them for picking up some picks in the trade, and then for the Falcons just adding another receiving threat, even though he hasn't really done much in his career.
I thought that was excellent value for Hayden Hurst. I wasn't a big fan of Hayden Hurst when I looked at him pre-draft, so I thought they got excellent value. Next trade, 49ers traded DeForest Buckner to the Colts. for their first round pick, which is 13 overall. Colts then immediately signed him to a massive $21 million annual average value contract, making him the second highest paid defensive lineman behind only Aaron Donald. What do you think about that one?
We get to play the AFC South this year, don't we?
We do get to play the AFC South.
That's
How exciting.
great. That's great. We get to see him and Hargrave and Fletcher Cox this year. That's great.
Yeah, dude.
I mean, I think it was a good move for both teams. The Niners have to pay guys, and they had to make these choices. For the Colts, it was a good choice. He bolsters their defense. And remember when they had a ton of cap space last year? Well, it's all gone now. Doesn't take much.
Yeah, man, just one big move. I like it for both teams. I thought it was a really solid trade. The 49ers really wanted draft capital, and what they're going to plan to do during the draft, they're probably going to trade back, whether it be with 13 or 31. They might trade back both. Who knows? They don't have, I forget the exact numbers. I don't think they have a third, fourth, fifth, sixth, or seventh round pick. I think that after the third round, they have no picks, and I think they're trying to get some in the later draft, and that's what they're going to do. They're going to trade back here is the idea. So I like to trade for both teams. Next trade, Lions agreed to trade cornerback Darius Slay to the Eagles for a third and fifth round pick. What do you have to say about that?
I probably would have hoped to get more for someone like him, but he clearly wanted out, so you get to take care of that, and they'll probably take a cornerback early in the draft this year. And for the Eagles, it helps solidify a terrible secondary, so that's a good move for them.
Okudah could be a Detroit Lion quite easily, the Ohio State guy. So that's exciting for them. I mean, they should have traded Darius Slay earlier because they would have gotten more value, but it is what it is. Third and the fifth, you can make it work. The Steelers did.
They sure did.
Antonio Brown. So then after that, the last thing that we're going to actually talk about, and then we're just going to list off stuff. Bills, after failing to trade for their big-name diva wide receiver last year, elect to make a splash this year, trading for Vikings wide receiver Stephon Diggs, trading a first, a fifth, a sixth, and a 2021 fourth for Diggs and a seventh. What do you think about this trade?
It doesn't look as good when you compare that trade to the DeAndre Hopkins trade for the Cardinals. I'm not as big on Stephon Diggs as others are. I don't think he was even the best receiver on his team, but I don't think he's bad either. I'm curious to see how it's going to work out because he's a deep threat guy, and even though Josh Allen is a strong-armed quarterback, he's had trouble getting the ball down the field early on in his NFL career. So I'm kind of curious to see how that's going to work.
What I think about this trade, ignoring the DeAndre Hopkins stuff, I don't like this trade based on the year this is in. I think any other year I would have been okay with this because I'm not a big Stephon Diggs fan either. He's another diva wide receiver that's been a problem on the sidelines for the Vikings. And with that considered, I also, with how deep this wide receiver class is, I know Diggs is a guarantee. Like, you know what Diggs is. But with how deep this wide receiver class is, to get rid of those late round picks, I felt like you could have taken multiple wide receivers in this draft and you're going to hit. It's likely. I think this trade would have been better if you get rid of the 2021 fourth that the Bills gave up, and then the Vikings get rid of their seventh. So it's just a first, a fifth, and a sixth for Diggs. I think that makes it a little bit better for the year. Otherwise, any other year, this is like a semi-decent trade. I still don't like Diggs, but for a wide receiver, that's like the going price for even a decent one. So I'm not a fan of the year that they're doing this in with how many wide receivers are coming out of this draft class. Anyhow, that was all like the news we're going to talk about. So now I'm just going to go quick fire and read a bunch of stuff. That's going to be like a whole essay right here. Okay. So Vikings have made quite a few moves, handing out a couple extensions, giving Kirk Cousins a 2-year, $66 million extension that clears $10 million in cap space in 2020. It includes $61 million guaranteed at signing, and they extended fullback C.J. Ham, giving him a 4-year, $12.25 million deal. They also made some cuts to make these moves, cutting cornerback Xavier Rhodes, trash, and defensive tackle Linval Joseph. Linval Joseph has since signed with the Chargers. They have also placed a second-round tender on restricted free agent linebacker Eric Wilson. Then the Rams released Todd Gurley, saving them $10 million in cap space. He has since signed with the Atlanta Falcons. Dolphins released Rashad Jones, freeing up $5.3 million in cap space for them. Dolphins then made a splash, getting Byron Jones average annual value. He can play both safety and corner, but is way better suited at corner. And also, the Dolphins got former Patriots linebacker Kyle Van Noy. Titans made a bunch of releases, releasing running back Dion Lewis, defensive end Cameron Wake, kicker Ryan Suckup, and tight end Delaney Walker, giving them room to sign Ryan Tannehill to a new 4-year, $118 million deal with $91 million in total guarantees. And also, speaking of franchise tags, here are the other franchise tag players: Matthew Judon, Baltimore; Justin Simmons, Denver; Hunter Henry, Yannick Ngakoue, Jacksonville; Anthony Tooney, New England; Dak Prescott, which is an exclusive one, in Dallas; A.J. Green in Cincinnati; Shaquille Barrett in Tampa Bay; Brandon Sheriff in Washington; Leonard Williams from the New York Jets; and Chris Jones in Kansas City. Then the Colts have released defensive tackle Marcus Hunt and slot corner Pierre Desir, and have signed left tackle Anthony Costanzo to a new 2-year, $33 million extension. Desir has since signed a 1-year deal with the New York Jets. I believe it's 1 year, $6 million. The Colts also have a new quarterback, signing Phillip Rivers to a 1-year, $25 million deal that he hopes lasts longer than that, but he only said he wanted to play for like 2 more years, so I don't know what that means. The Browns have released Christian Kirksey and Morgan Burnett. Kirksey has since agreed in principle to a 2-year, $16 million contract with the Packers. Burnett is trash. The Browns are signing Austin Hooper to a 4-year, $44 million deal. $23 million is guaranteed. Browns also made one of the first free agent signings of this season, signing Jack Conklin to a 3-year, $42 million deal with $30 million guaranteed. Also, after seeing us get an AFC West fullback, the Browns got jealous and then traded a 2021 7th-rounder for Andy Yanovich, formerly of the Broncos. Speaking of the Broncos making trades, the Broncos then traded a 2027 round pick to the Titans for defensive end Terrell Casey. They also made a big signing Melvin Gordon to a 2-year, $60 million deal. Trash, don't pay running backs. Jaguars made a few moves, including trading Nick Foles to the Bears for a 4th-round pick, and also signing Joe Schobert to a 5-year, $53.75 million deal with $34.5 million guaranteed. With Joe Schobert coming here, he's going to play middle linebacker for the Jaguars, and Miles Jack is moving to outside linebacker. Hate that. Cowboys have signed defensive tight end Blake Jarwin to a 3-year, $24.25 extension. He gets $9.25 guaranteed. This is because Cowboys tight end Jason Witten isn't done yet. He's not retiring, but he's opting to go to Las Vegas on a 1-year deal. You know who is done for the Cowboys, though? Senator Travis Frederick, who is opting to retire after several injuries in his career. He's only 29, and that's a big loss for him, and it's good for him to step away on his own terms. The 49ers have signed defensive lineman Eric Armstead to a 5-year, $85 million mega deal. The Saints have signed wide receiver Emmanuel Sanders to a deal. Might be one of the best wide receiver duos in the league with him and Thomas now. Chargers released defensive tackle Brandon Mebane and linebacker Thomas Davis, and signed former Packers OT Brian Beluga as they continue to beef up their line for Ty God Taylor. They have also signed slot corner Chris Harris Jr. from the Broncos, and Thomas Davis has since reunited with Ron Rivera with the Redskins. The Bengals have released Cordy Glenn. They were unable to trade him. The Lions released Rick Wagner, who has since signed with the Packers. The contract details are unknown. Lions have signed to a 3-year, $30 million deal with $18 million guaranteed, and continuing to be the Patriots of the Mid-North. They traded for back Daron Harmon, giving up a 5th for Harmon and a 7th. Falcons released running back Devontae Freeman and quarterback Desmond Trufant. Meanwhile, they did sign Todd Gurley to replace Freeman. I said that already. Patriots have made a few moves, giving Devin McCourty a 2-year, $23 million deal. He gets $17 million in guarantees. They also signed special team standout Matt Slater to a 2-year deal with an average annual value of $2.6 million. Finally, they also placed an original round tender on offensive lineman Tremaine Illuminor, which they got from the Ravens in trade last year. Panthers made a few quarterback moves, releasing Cam Newton today, as we talked about, after failing to find a trade partner. Then they traded Ron Rivera, Kyle Allen for a 5th-round pick, which was a nice come-up, and signing P.J. Walker of the XFL to a contract. He was the first XFL player to sign a contract in the NFL. Texans have given Bradley Roby a 3-year, $36 million contract, and for some reason they've given Randall Cobb a 3-year, $27 million deal. Bears have given Danny Trevathan a 3-year extension. The contract details are unknown at the moment. Giants have agreed to a deal with former Packers linebacker Blake Martinez. The Bucs have signed JPP to a 2-year, $27 million deal. John Postic has officially signed with the Redskins at a 2-year, $6.6 million deal. And there's some more XFL signings. The leading quarterback with interceptions in the XFL signed with the Saints. Jordan Ta'amu has signed with the Chiefs. Devon Askew Henry, who was formerly with the Steelers, has signed a 2-year deal with the Giants. And he's the cousin of Darrelle Revis, and that's about it. The Panthers are signing former New York Jets wide receiver Robbie Anderson to the tune of a 2-year, $20 million deal. According to Adam Schefter, good payday for him. It seems like it's the constant payday of, what's it called? It's been $10 million deals for a lot of people. Usually 3-year, $30 million. Burks. Seattle Seahawks are signing for Patriots wide receiver Philip Dorsett as well. It's a 1-year deal for him, and that really wraps it up. So,
take a
if
deep
there's
breath.
anything you would like to say,
Just take a deep breath,
over
man.
now. That was all the news that happened in like the past 2 weeks.
Just take a deep breath. Take it. You did a good job, man. Just take it easy. I think, that just about covers it. Because the Steelers have signed Eric Ebron, we think that tight end is not as big of a need now, so we're going to be doing that a little bit sooner than we were originally planning. But right now, having just concluded tackles, we'll be talking about edge rushers on our next podcast, which we'll hopefully be doing by the end of the week. And we'll be humming along. When we complete that, we'll be halfway through, Austin. So just keep cranking them out.
Yeah, man, we're going to keep pushing on.
What day is the NFL draft? As of right now.
It is April 23rd.
Third.
23rd, yeah.
Thursday, April 23rd. Assuming they still don't delay it. So that gives us, let's see,
3
so
days.
it's 30 days from today. So,
Yeah.
alrighty. We'll have our work cut out for us. But hey, we do this every year. We'll be alright.
Yeah.
Alrighty, my man. You all set?
Sir.
Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, thank you as always for listening to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. As is always the case, if you have questions that you want us to answer, email us at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com and check out our website, strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com. Austin, thank you for joining me today. Always appreciate your hard work. And ladies and gentlemen, hope you are continuing to practice social distancing and are staying safe out there. As this COVID-19 pandemic affects us all. We're in this together, but also not together since we're doing it apart. But doing it together, everybody, one day at a time. Thank you, as always, for listening to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. Have a terrific day.
Bye.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.